To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately disentangle our minds from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all the distinctness of reality. Now let's discuss this further. So I titled today's conversation Mind Map, Once You Imagine Correctly, the Shift Happens Immediately. So we think feelingly from the premise of having what we desire and allow God to take care of everything else from there. By remaining in your flow, by abiding as you are, which is the stillness, you remain in your flow and thus you allow your mind to remain fluid, like we discussed in Thursday's video. Fluidity of mind in relation to what appears as the bridge of incidence to actualizing the desired outcome. If you haven't seen it, I'll link in the description to it. Mental rigidity-based beliefs resulting from dichotomous thinking can spawn out thoughts of all or nothing based doubt, like this means it's not working in relation to whatever circumstance that appears. To allow the mind to remain fluid, resulting in these kinds of thoughts not appearing, abide in the feeling of isn't it wonderful, like Neville stated when he was asked the following question. He was asked, is it possible to imagine several things at the same time, or should I confine my imagining to one desire? In which his response was, personally I like to confine my imaginal act to a single thought, but that does not mean I will stop there. During the course of a day, I may imagine many things, but instead of imagining lots of small things, I would suggest that you imagine something so big, it includes all the little things. Instead of imagining wealth, health, and friends, imagine being ecstatic. You could not be ecstatic and be in pain. You could not be ecstatic and be threatened with a disposition notice. You could not be ecstatic if you were not enjoying a full measure of friendship and love. What would the feeling be like were you ecstatic without knowing what had happened to produce your ecstasy? Reduce the idea of ecstasy to the single sensation. Isn't it wonderful? Repeat over and over again. Isn't it wonderful? Suspend judgment as to what is wonderful. Catch the one sensation of the wonder of it all, and things will happen to bear witness to the truth of this sensation. And I promise you, it will include all the little things. So the way I experience this is I have my goals, my visions, my definite chief aim, already accepted as done. And as I remain in the state that implies, isn't it wonderful, when it comes to relating with others, for example, it is easier to imagine them lovingly, to mediate God to them, as he said in his Pruning Shears of Revision lecture. Anytime you use your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are at that moment literally mediating God to them. Imagination is the redemptive power of the world, and you are actually mediating God to them by using it in a loving, wonderful way. And so, what we think feelingly upon is what we experience more of. And as a result of being this way, I've seen some of my relationships that I would once not consider ideally mutually harmonious transform into ones that are now ideally mutually harmonious. So to imagine correctly, to experience a wonderful life in various ways, capture the feeling that implies, isn't it wonderful? Capture that feeling and do not allow the conscious reasoning mind, as he said, to look for visible causes. As we know, there's only one cause and it is within, I am. Rather, repeat over and over again, isn't it wonderful? Suspending judgment as to what is wonderful. As mentioned, the results of this state also appear as wonderful effects, like, as he said, includes the other aspects of life, for example, loving, harmonious relationships. So others reflect our state of consciousness. There's no one to change but self. This is what I mean by let your world be, and imagine it ideally by capturing the feeling of what you desire it to be as now. In my life back in the days, by not abiding in my ideal state, it seemed that people didn't want to be around me. If I would talk to them in an environment, they would reflect my state, which upon connecting the dots looking backwards was not ideal at the time. So they would appear that way, which includes friends, family, business, and personal relationships. So I like how he said, suspend judgment as to what is wonderful. In other words, let your world be. Do not judge by outward appearances. John 7:24. Stop judging according to outward appearances. Rather, judge according to righteous judgment, which is the inner acceptance of it being what you desire it to be as. To desire is to have. This is unconditional being, capturing and abiding in the feeling of, isn't it wonderful now, regardless of what appears. And the same is true of your true nature, which is fulfillment, bliss, happiness, and love as well, as he said one time. Love is our birthright. Love is the fundamental necessity of our life. Do not go seeking for that which you are. So, do not go seeking for that which you are means you are already that which you seek. If it be love, you can embody it now by capturing the feeling of being love, regardless of interpretation of what appears through the five senses. If it is bliss, acknowledge that you are that. Sat Chit Ananda in Sanskrit. Existence, consciousness, bliss, or truth, consciousness, bliss. If it is fulfillment, you are that. The I is fulfillment, as it is one with all, and thus has all. If it is happiness, you are that. As Ramana Maharshi once said, happiness is your true nature. It is not wrong to desire it. So there's nothing wrong with you if you desire love, bliss, happiness, and fulfillment. Imagine what implies this and allow it to appear accordingly in and as the outer expressions of life. What you seek, you already have, as Neville said. What you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it. You found it in the form of desire. So to desire a state is to have it. Thus, to ideally let your world be, accept self fully, unconditionally, as already being love, bliss, happiness, and fulfillment. This ceases the appearances of seeking behaviors and instead manifests all that is ideally related in and as ideal experiences and ideal relationships. Now, we've been discussing Neville's work for a number of years now, every Sunday actually, since 2019, and we're going on to 2024. And what I've found throughout the many stories I've shared with you over the years from applying this information is that we are always applying the law, and every moment, which is now, is an opportunity to apply the law by accepting that you already are that which you desire to be, to accept that you already have what you desire, by capturing the feeling of what implies your fulfillment, bliss, happiness, and love. So the way I like to look at this is the pearl of great price, as he calls it, which is imagination creates reality, is a perpetual practice, yet the practice becomes ideally automatic. And by that I mean, every imaginal act is an investment that becomes a habit. And then it becomes ideally automatic, as he said one time. I did it, I'm doing it, and I will continue to do it until that which I have done is perfectly externalized within my world. So we're always imagining, whether we're aware of it or not. Through the simple observation of our imaginings, we can ask ourselves the question, is it ideal from the premise of having? And are we allowing our world to be? Thus allowing God to actualize what we desire it to be as. We let thoughts of disharmony be, as in we don't identify with them. With emotions, we allow them to release. We let them be without labeling them with thoughts of not being in harmony with our vision. Thus again, a healthy relationship with self, thoughts, and emotions allows it to be easier to disentangle our minds from the evidence of the senses, if applicable to circumstances, to reimagine what appears to be as what we desire it to be as. For example, when I was developing my public speaking back in 2010, when I used to teach speed reading workshops, there were strong emotions that felt unpleasant leading up to the presentation. I allowed them to be. They would release. I would not identify with inharmonious thoughts in relation to them. And then it would be easier to imagine the audience lovingly, and they would appear accordingly. through the repetition of imagining us relating ideally at the events, as he said, I did it, I'm doing it, and I will continue to do it until that which I've done is perfectly externalized within my world. What happened was those strong emotions that felt unpleasant were not there, and neither were the thoughts of doubt, all by letting the world be. This was symbolic for me and related to two passages in Scripture, Genesis 1:3, the Aramaic Bible translation, and God said, "The light shall be, and the light was." And Genesis 2:1, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array." So consciousness is the light, as Neville mentioned, in the power of awareness. The light is consciousness. Consciousness is one, manifesting in legions of forms or levels of consciousness. So we don't force the light. We let the light be. The light is consciousness. We allow the light to appear accordingly to reflect our intentionally chosen state of consciousness, which exists now alongside the infinite states that have already been created. This allows everything that appears to transform ideally automatically accordingly as God animates all in accordance to your chosen state of consciousness. So thus all that appears arise from the light, which is consciousness, which was created by God, again in Genesis 1:3. And God said, "The light shall be, and the light was." Thus all that appears to arise from consciousness, including the sense of self, which is pure consciousness, which is one with the sense of self of all, as there's no real separation or gap in consciousness. This formless, pure consciousness, which is you, observes all that appears, which includes the world made visible through the five senses and the imaginal activity that it appears from. This pure consciousness is whole, complete, and has everything as it is one with all. This pure consciousness is love, fulfillment, bliss, and happiness by nature. As you acknowledge that your sense of self is that, you can easily let the world be, thoughts and emotions be, and allow your chosen state to manifest. And that's the key word, allow. Let there be light. So allow the light to be and appear to transform all that appears to reflect what you imagine lovingly, as he said. Anytime you use your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are at that moment literally mediating God to them. Imagination is the redemptive power of the world, and you are actually mediating God to them by using it in a loving, wonderful way. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Happy holidays to you and your loved ones. I appreciate you and love you very much. Let's conclude our discussion today with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You can say, "Isn't it wonderful? I allow all that appears to allow my vision to actualize as I remain in my flow on the journey to actualizing my vision from peace, love, bliss, happiness, and fulfillment in harmonious relationship with all that appears." If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.